Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the main event. Introducing Carissa Green Industries. Let's get ready to launch!
I recently spoke with Dan Holman and Eric Flis of WorldStack, an open source intelligence or OSINT company based in Canberra, Australia. We dove into the sometimes surprising and sometimes scarily powerful capabilities of OSINT and its use cases. It really opened my eyes to an area of tech and data security of which I was aware and had an appreciation for, but not a detailed understanding. It was a fascinating chat, and I think we're only just scratching the surface in terms of the capabilities and applications to which OSINT might be applied to. So I know you and Eric come from a pretty deep InfoSec background. Was this venture into OSINT essentially scratching your own itch, as they say?
Yeah, look, when I met Eric, we were working at a cybersecurity startup together. I saw what Eric was doing, I guess, in the cybersecurity space with incident response. So there's lots of manual collection around, I guess, collecting data to do with cybersecurity incident. Lots of going to like social media pages, Facebook, Google plus Twitter, etc., and doing searches on those platforms, looking for the data, I guess, to link what happened in the incident back to a threat actor. And I saw Eric was sort of at the beginnings of building a platform to automate a lot of that process, because there's a lot of time involved in manually doing the collection. And I guess some other things he was talking about at the time was it's very easy to lose track of where you're up to in terms of collection. So have I already collected against that particular person or that particular topic? So it's quite easy to make a mistake when you're going through an operation manually like that using pen and paper. So I guess with my background in IT and building systems, I saw what he was doing and said, hey, started jotting down on a bit of paper and drawing a bit of a mud map of how this might work if we were to build it in a sort of cloud solution with a proper data pipeline, and we could automate the collection, and then we could put something else in to do visualization. And I have to say the earliest prototypes were pretty ugly, but we got quickly into, I guess, building something that actually started to work, and you could see where it was going to go in terms of making the process a lot easier, a lot faster, and a lot more powerful, bringing those different feeds together and starting to see those insights from joining them together.
So when you say define started to work, so can you tell me what that actually means? So when you say it started to work, can you define what that means in terms of what that looks like back then?
Yeah, so back then the user interface was really ugly. It was very clunky. But when I say started to work, it means that we were able to hit websites and collect data, and it was brought back into a central database. Essentially, one of the first problems we had to solve was all of these different data sources are a different structure, and how do you bring them together, and so you can put it in a single database and then do visualizations on it, because it needs to be in a common data format. And so that was our first hurdle to solve. And when we had that collection working in that single data format, we knew we had sort of a lot of the key problems solved in terms of getting the database together. And the next thing was trying to, I guess, work on that user interface and how do we get the visualization working? And we started like really basic, basic user interface. And then I think it was we spent a few months working on that, a few revisions of the user interface, and eventually we came across the Elastic Stack, which is what we use now. So I don't know if you haven't heard of it. Elastic Stack is essentially a database, and then I guess a visualization layer. It's primarily used for log monitoring in cybersecurity, but we repurposed it to because a lot of what we're doing with, I guess, open source intelligence and the collection, the way we do it, it's very similar to how you take a log feed into a scene, and we've built a solution that's very similar to that. And so I guess Kibana, we could see that you could just repurpose it if you're looking at logs. If we substitute logs for social media posts, we use exactly the same visualizations as they do for log management, like log management and security information event management.
Got you. So I guess that leads me to my next question on the security front. How does your cyber background inform WorldStack and what you guys are doing in the OSINT world?
Yes, it's interesting, I guess, coming from both an IT and a cybersecurity background, and then Eric's background in intelligence. I guess what we're doing here in this space is I guess at the intersection of those three things. A lot of what we're doing with the tech stack right now wasn't possible 5 years ago. So we use technologies like AWS, really easy to scale infrastructure to build the actual solution to power a lot of the I guess the data collection and analysis we're doing in the back end. And then I guess with our cybersecurity backgrounds and understanding what sorts of threats we're looking for. So, but even without having the software solution, we knew that, for example, people in organizations posting things about, the sorts of technologies they're using inside a workplace, or they're talking about, they're leaking information about how the organization runs certain technologies, which is just fodder for someone who's looking to do reconnaissance on an organization. So I guess when we saw that, when we were doing general cybersecurity work, that we've taken that knowledge and applied it. So we've got this platform now to look for those things in an automated way, rather than have to manually go in and try and find this sorts of information. If you're in a security operations center or part of a security team trying to do that kind of monitoring on your own without a tool or a platform like that, it's quite time consuming. It's pretty much impossible to do.
Do you think people are still doing, obviously people are still doing it manually? Is it because that they're not aware that this exists, or the cost of it, or sort of more of a behavioural change and an uptake towards utilising something like this?
I think it's probably a combination of a number of those things. I guess from my perspective, working in cybersecurity and OSINT, it gave me an understanding of the technology stacks that we could potentially use, and the different advancements being made. One thing it did highlight, working in cybersecurity in particular in this space, was the gaps. I guess the gaps in what's commonly touted as intelligence within cybersecurity, and the overuse of terms like threat intelligence.
Yes.
In a lot of cases, there's no real intelligence there at all. It's just, someone's given you a bad IP address and it's network-based stuff. It doesn't actually tell you, who's targeting us and why. Do we have to plan for them in the future? Will they ever be coming back? Is this just a random thing, or is it an ongoing, higher level, very targeted threat? So it gave me and Dan a very clear understanding, I think, of the gaps in what's commonly termed as intelligence within cybersecurity. It's normally anything but intelligence.
So can I just drill down a little bit on that one, on the intelligence front? So you said obviously there are people that, as we all know, that probably go around and overuse the word of intelligence and machine learning and AI and all these types of things. Can you define sort of more about what that looks like from where the real intelligence versus, the more show pony, the intelligence stuff in terms of threat intelligence? What does that look like if someone were to sort of go looking for this type of stuff in the market? What should they steer away from, and sort of maybe asking those types of questions so they are getting the right, they are buying the right capability in the market?
Yeah, so I mean, if you go to any of the IT security conferences, there's plenty of intelligence solutions out there. Nearly every other booth is touted as some form of intelligence. Most of that is network-based intelligence or intelligence from logs, so anomalous traffic, misuse of resources by internal users, that kind of stuff. But generally, it's not telling you anything about why someone's doing something, who's doing it and why, which is really important in understanding, who's targeting my organization and why. That actually allows you to not only stop it now, but also plan for the future. What do I need to put in place in future to secure our organization? Because this is going to be an ongoing threat, because now we know who it is and why they're doing it. Or maybe it's not. Maybe it's not ongoing. It could be a one-off, but through actual attribution of threat actors allows you to sort of make those determinations, whereas your traditional network-based intelligence, IP addresses, blacklistings, doesn't tell you any of that. And, blacklisting IP addresses is not really intelligence, and that's commonly touted as threat intelligence.
Got you. Okay, got you. Now, what I'd like to ask, what are the applications for OSINT in terms of cyber defense?
Yeah, a couple spring to mind. One we just talked about just before, incident response, and Eric was just talking about technical data. So, I guess we've got that information now. If an organisation's keeping audit logs, which is a big if sometimes in my experience, but if they have that sort of information, you can combine that as well as whatever you might have had from the payload of the attack. So the malware itself is another form of technical intelligence, but then sometimes you're able to link it back to an actual attacker. So I guess, a good example of that is where we found there was a compromise, and that the customer data was actually dumped online. And in the dump itself, there was clues as to who did it. Now we had the combination of internal data, so the client that was compromised, we knew who the vendor was that might have been involved. They gave us the customer data that was taken, and so we were able to put together enough links to say with a pretty good degree of confidence that a certain person committed that crime. I guess other use cases that spring to mind are things like vulnerability monitoring. So at the moment, I guess when you think about a security team, you think I'm running a certain tech stack, so I need to understand for that tech stack, what's the latest vulnerability information, what sort of patches do I need to put onto it. With our solution, you can automate monitoring of those sorts of feeds to say, not only when the vendor announces them, but also when the hacker community starts talking about them, before they're used in the wild, so potentially getting a jump on zero-day attacks. Yep. Another use case is things like insider threat monitoring. We were talking about that one earlier as well, where if you've got particularly sensitive projects inside your organisation, for example, you can monitor your social presence for your company and any key employees to see, it's usually, in most cases, it's not malicious. They just don't understand what putting that kind of information online can do, how valuable it is to attackers. But with a solution like ours, you can monitor for that sort of information and say, is there any of that key information that's available online to anyone that's looking? And then I guess a final one in the cybersecurity space might be attack surface assessments. We just talked about what's available in the social side of things, but I guess going further, so a common thing we see is in like Stack Overflow, people's tech teams in there talking about their technologies, so the technology that a customer's running, as well as bugs that they've got and how do I fix them. That sort of stuff's gold for hackers. They'll just use that information as a free pass in to your organisation. They don't even have to run a scan. They've just been told what sort of tech stack you're running, what version it is, and what vulnerability you've got. No,
absolutely. Now, I know that you've both sort of touched on a few different things, but the next, in terms of the OSINT stuff and also talking about how people haven't necessarily adapted to OSINT, what I'd like to know is, how does OSINT displace good old traditional mechanisms for discovery?
So I don't know if it displaces it. It's another tool in your arsenal. I guess the power in all forms of intelligence is in fusion, right? Fusing your different sources, whether it's open source, closed source, network-based intelligence. So when we talk about, bad IP addresses and so forth, or looking at logs and your network traffic, they're still all things that should be done because you want a whole picture. So open source intelligence is one piece of the puzzle, I guess, so to speak. So, but what it does do is give you that attribution part about the who, the why, the where, the when, the other stuff, the more traditional, network-based and technical intelligence won't necessarily give you.
So is it just scale and automation, or are there other benefits as well?
Well, automation is a big one. I mean, teams are really, really small, and the things that you need to monitor are continually growing. So, that's one thing. But I guess doing these things manually, if you were trying to do attribution manually, there's so much information out there, you're probably going to miss it.
Of course. Well, I'm always a person that talks more about the behavior and change of why people adapt to new technologies. Now, I know in Australia, people are a little bit more reluctant to adapt to new technologies. What I'd like to know is, how do you see this changing, and how will InfoSec leverage OSINT in the future?
Yeah, I think intelligence, including OSINT, will increasingly help organisations get on the front foot and prevent and detect cyber threats before they happen. I think there's a real danger there as well in terms of predictive machines and crystal balls, and I don't think they exist. And every time we're asked about them, I tell them, that's not what we do. We're not about predicting the future. But I think with the right data and the right linkages, you can start to see patterns emerging before events actually happen and actually do something about them. So it might be, for example, detecting that there is information available online about your organisations and its technologies before someone gets to use it and taking it down. So doing that scan and that continuous monitoring. First, the scan to get rid of it. Secondly, the continuous monitoring to make sure it doesn't pop up again. And that really reduces your attack surface and reduces the likelihood that you're going to suffer a major attack in the future.
Do you think that... I absolutely get what you're saying. What I wanted to probably drill down a little bit more is the uptake to it. So are people sort of adapting to this type of change, or they sort of set in their old ways? Is it more an awareness piece that people don't know this is a thing and they're a little bit reluctant because no one else is kind of utilizing this form of technology? What do you sort of see in the future of organizations adapting to this?
Okay. Yeah, no, okay, I understand what you mean now. I think intelligence in cybersecurity is something that's growing and becoming more prevalent, particularly around in organisations where they've had a recent attack. We find the people most open to looking at these sorts of things are those that have just suffered a breach, and they're sort of asking the question of, why didn't we see this coming? We've got all these whiz-bang gizmos in here and nothing saw it, nothing picked it up.
Got you.
And so they're asking the question like, well, what else can we do? And so I guess that's one type of organisation that's looking to intelligence. The other one is, and the one we love dealing with, is proactive organisations. So the CISOs that really, they're thinking about, well, how else can I improve my security posture? What else can I do to get out in front of this threat curve? And we love having conversations with them because some of our, solutions, our best solutions are coming from discussions with these people who are going, this is what I've done. What else can we do to try and detect this? Or I'm really worried about this. Is there anything you can do with your technologies to try and find a way for us to better defend against these sorts of attacks? So I guess they're probably the two trends pushing us towards intelligence-led cybersecurity. I think that, as Eric was saying earlier, that I guess the overloaded use of the word threat intelligence hasn't helped our cause any in terms of us trying to push forward the intelligence-led agenda. But
absolutely.
I think when we start being more clear about what intelligence actually means and moving beyond, IP addresses and logs and that sort of thing, and saying, well, if we can get a better understanding of these threat actors and their tools, techniques and procedures, we can work harder to get in front of that, those threats before they're happening. And I think every organization really wants to do that. I think probably the biggest, impediment to people moving to this model is that there's so many different things that we have to do in terms of compliance before we even look at becoming proactive. So you've got compliance, and then you've got risk-based, and then you make that sort of evolution through to proactive and intelligence-led. And there really is a maturity model there. And so I would actually say that not all organisations are ready to go to intelligence-led. They really need to think about, well, what makes sense for my organisation, and doing this kind of monitoring might not make sense for that organisation at that point in time, but in some cases it does. So I guess each organisation will have to make up their own mind about it, but we're not in the business of, I guess, saying if you don't have this, bad things will happen. It's more about, if you're really interested in these sorts of threats and you really do want to get ahead of the curve, then we can most likely help you.
Got you. So what I've taken from that is basically, I guess, CISOs who are probably more curious about what else is out there. And then second of all, from a maturity point of view, and just some companies, or a lot of companies, still are not there yet, and they're still trying to get their feet beneath them. But I'm actually excited to ask this question. So, and we left it at the end as well, is the James Bond stuff. I want to know what the wildest use case you have under your belt, like the most extreme, out there, craziest, messed up stuff that you can tell me. I'm excited.
I don't know if it's quite James Bond, but Dan briefly mentioned, I think, an incident response we recently worked on or supported. So part of that was the, monitoring for data being leaked online. Once we identified that and we had an idea of who the person of interest may be, the organisation wanted us to do a much more in-depth dive on them to, I guess, build a profile, determine where they were at, what they were involved in, and from that we're able to, link this individual to old comments on tech forums where he was trying to learn about the particular type of attack avenue that was present in the incident we were dealing with, through to determining exactly what apartment he lived in a particular place using a combination of techniques varying from image analysis, Google Street View, metadata, posted about on his online social media profiles. Mm-hmm. So we could actually get to a point where we were just able to say he lives in this apartment at this address because of the view out of his window from a picture he posted when he first moved in.
Oh my gosh, it's pretty creepy. I just started visually going through my mind going, oh, I hope I haven't done that before.
We can check out your account after this.
Maybe you've already done it. But I know this one is in the public domain. I saw it's on your site, the Russian fleet. This is fascinating. Can we dig a little bit deeper on that? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that was more of a test case on our behalf. It wasn't linked to any, incident or anything we were particularly engaged to do. It was more, how do we keep our skills sharp and figure out what we can and what we can't figure out. So it was sort of a question I posed to myself. Can we track, Russian naval vessels across the globe and understand where their area operations are, maybe who's on board. And I guess from what you saw online, I guess the answer is yes to that. And as well as crowdsourcing, right? So being in a Western country, it'd probably be difficult for me to travel to Russia to some of the sites where ships are docking and that sort of thing. So using crowdsourced information, we know about, train spotters and plane spotters. Well, there's also naval ship spotters we discovered. So, and they live in Russia, for example, so they have no problem taking pictures of these ships close up. So it was interesting to see both, crew from those ships posting when they were docking or traveling through certain places, through to citizens in particular towns where the vessels dock taking pictures, not just of the naval vessels, but in some cases aircraft flying over because there was some sort of military parade type thing going on where they were breaking in a new ship or whatever it may be. So there were other, side avenues for information or sources of information that came out of that sort of little study we did.
Something pedestrian, but I know our audience will appreciate: risk scoring. Can you tell me more about how your tools are helping with decision making?
Yeah, certainly. So one of the emerging trends in cybersecurity is cybersecurity insurance. And one of the problems I don't think they've yet solved in cybersecurity insurance is how do they price insurance premiums? So How do I gauge how much risk one organisation is compared to another in terms of their cybersecurity risk? Some of the ways that you can go about that is compliance with certain benchmarks, like the Australian Government Information Security Manual or the CIS benchmarks. There's other companies that are looking at doing like external scans or even pen tests to give each organisation a score. We're taking a little bit of a different approach. So we're looking at the human side of cyber risk and saying, well, what sorts of human type risks are there? So for your employees, what could be used against them to gain information? What's available already online about the organization that a hacker could use to attack you? If I was to research the directors and their past, is there anything there that could be used to blackmail them, for example? Having these sorts of approaches to cybersecurity, I guess risk scoring for the purposes of cybersecurity insurance policies is helpful as well. So some of the other ways that you can use OSINT for risk scoring might be things like vendor risk. So I want to understand what sort of risk one of my supplier poses to my organization from a cyber point of view. So you can go and do an open source assessment of that supplier and say, well, how could this information about this supplier be used to get access to my organization? So not just looking at your own organization in terms of an attack surface, but what sort of threat does your supply chain pose? Because as you would have heard in recent attacks, that's definitely an emerging vector for cybersecurity attacks coming in through your supply chain. Another way to look at how you can use OSINT is things like when you're hiring employees. So what sort of background checks are you doing on employees? How are you assessing the risk of that employee joining your company? Have you done a thorough check into not only what they've put on their resume, but what have they put on their social media profiles? What have they published online? What sort of groups are they a member of? And what does that say about them? And I guess how will that reflect on your brand when they're part of your organization? And I guess the third area there that I wanted to talk about, other than cybersecurity insurance, is in mergers and acquisitions. So those that are interested in either being acquired or acquiring other companies, you want to do your proper due diligence on that organization. And there's some very valuable information out there online that's available that we can access to do an assessment from an open source point of view. So it might be things like, and it's not just your general ASIC checks on a director, but who is that director? Who are they connected to? What's their past like? What do they talk about online? What does that say about them? What do they say about their organization to other people? What is said about their organization in public? And through that information and combine that information together, you get a real sense for what is that organization? Who are those directors? And are they something that you want to be part of your brand?
What I'd like to, I thank you both. I think this has been a really, really cool episode. I think a lot of people are getting a lot of value out of it because it's something that people aren't really aware of in Australia, and the people that I speak to aren't really totally aware of this type of stuff. So I do really appreciate both of you taking the time. But lastly, how can people reach out to you if they're really interested in this stuff, the crazy stuff that you guys had to talk about? How can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, just go to our website, www.worldstack.net. There's all our email addresses, phone numbers. Otherwise, you can look up myself or Eric and reach out to us on LinkedIn or Twitter.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, guys. I really, really do appreciate it.
No worries. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. We're looking forward to bringing you frequent snippets of what's happening in the security and emerging tech industries. If you think there's someone I should be speaking with, even if it's you, reach out to media@carissabrianindustries.com and we'll try to make it happen.